They told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because poverty doesn't belong at our table. My mother-in-law smirked when she said it, like tossing me out was her greatest gift. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, swallowing the insult whole, knowing it would fuel me later. That night, as their mansion filled with laughter, the sky outside glowed brighter. Lights from a house across the street, my house, danced across the snow. And when my mother-in-law looked out the window and realized whose name was on the deed, her smirk shattered in silence. The wedding was everything people dreamed of. Champagne towers, a string quartet echoing through the marble hall, golden chandeliers shimmering as if the universe had aligned for us. I should have felt like a queen, yet a quiet unease pressed against my ribs. I saw it in the way his family glanced at me. Polite smiles stretched too thin, eyes flicking from my thrifted satin gown to the designer dresses swirling around me. For a moment, I wondered if they could see the stitches I had sewn myself into, if they could smell the years of working double shifts, clinging to the hem of my dress. When his mother hugged me, her perfume was sharp, invasive. "Welcome to the family," she said, but her hand lingered too long on my arm, like she was testing the fabric of my skin the way one tests counterfeit silk. Around us, guests whispered blessings, but in the corner, a woman leaned into her companion and murmured, "She must be marrying for the money. Look at her." The word stung even though I pretended not to hear. I swallowed hard, smiling as if the champagne had left me dizzy. That night, lying in bed beside my new husband, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if he had heard it too, and chosen silence. Weeks turned into months, and I tried to mold myself into their world. I learned the taste of caviar, the rhythm of wine pairings, the names of their favorite European resorts. But no matter how I folded myself to fit, I always felt the edge of their contempt. His sister commented on the brand of my handbag, calling it sweetly humble. His mother corrected the way I placed cutlery during dinner with a sharpness disguised as elegance. My husband rarely interfered. He would glance at me across the table with a strained smile, as if begging me not to make a scene, not to disturb the fragile peace. The breaking point arrived in December. The house was draped in garlands, golden ribbons trailing down staircases, the faint scent of pine thick in every room. Everyone gathered in the living room, hot mulled wine warming their hands. They discussed the upcoming Christmas dinner, the highlight of the family calendar. His mother, seated in her throne-like armchair, began announcing the guest list. Names were recited like scripture: uncles, cousins, friends of the family. Applause, laughter, nods of approval. When she reached the end, a silence stretched. I waited. My name never came. I thought it was a mistake, perhaps a slip of memory, but then her lips curled into a smile that was all venom wrapped in velvet. "Emily won't be joining us this year," she said, her voice calm, deliberate. "It's not appropriate to have outsiders at such a refined gathering. Poverty doesn't belong at our table." The room shifted. Some guests lowered their eyes. Others smirked, feeding off her cruelty. My breath caught in my throat, though I forced myself not to flinch. The words struck harder than any slap. It wasn't just exclusion, it was a public declaration that I would never be one of them. I turned to my husband, desperate for him to intervene, to defend me, to say anything that might stitch the torn fabric of my dignity back together. His eyes met mine, full of conflict. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. And in that instant, the silence between us screamed louder than any insult. I felt the ground vanish beneath me, as though the marble floor had given way to an endless pit. Their laughter echoed around me, hollow and sharp, each note carving deeper into my chest. I had entered this family believing love would be enough to bridge worlds. Instead, I had been cast as an intruder, a guest overstaying her welcome in her own marriage. I smiled. It was small, fragile, and it cost me everything. But behind it, a thought burned steady, fierce. They would not see me break. Not tonight. After that night, I allowed myself to look broken. I walked through their home with lowered eyes, speaking only when spoken to, my voice trembling as though I were always on the edge of tears. I let them think their cruelty had hollowed me out. His mother smirked with satisfaction whenever I excused myself early from a gathering, her words dripping with mock pity. "She's delicate. Poor thing. This world is too heavy for her." They believed I was crumbling, a fragile ornament that would shatter with the slightest pressure. But weakness, I knew, was the best camouflage. In truth, each time I excused myself, I wasn't retreating to lick my wounds. I was planning. I would sit in the quiet of my study, the room no one else entered, and spread documents across the desk. Beneath a false bottom in my wardrobe lay a small steel safe, one they would never suspect existed. The first night I turned the dial, my hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. Inside were files, contracts, passwords, and a single flash drive containing years of my life's work. They thought I had married into wealth. What they didn't know was that long before I took my husband's name, I had built something of my own. For years, I had worked quietly, saving every spare dollar, learning to code by night while working dead-end jobs by day. I had poured every ounce of myself into building a small tech company that no one believed would succeed. But now, investors were circling like moths to flame. I had just closed a funding round worth millions, though the announcement was weeks away from going public. At that moment, I was wealthier than my in-laws could ever imagine, and they, in their arrogance, believed I was powerless. I let them think so. I needed them to. While they dined and mocked, I met with contractors in secret. The house across the street, the one they often joked was too ostentatious, even for this neighborhood, was no longer on the market. I had signed the deed weeks ago, in a conference room lit by sterile fluorescent lights, while they were busy sipping champagne. The mansion would be mine, but no one yet knew. At night, I would walk past it slowly, its windows dark, its walls silent, imagining what it would look like bathed in light, every roofline outlined in Christmas colors, every tree in the yard shimmering with gold and silver. I pictured my mother-in-law's face when she looked out her window and saw that the house she envied most belonged to the woman she had just cast aside. The thought made me smile in the darkness, yet I played my part during the day. I let my shoulders sag at the dinner table. I fumbled with my fork to invite another correction from her sharp tongue. I apologized too quickly, allowed their pity to mask their disdain. They whispered that my marriage wouldn't last, that I wasn't cut out for this life. They were right about one thing. I wasn't cut out for their life. I was building my own. The documents in the safe grew thicker each week. Partnership agreements, architectural plans for renovations, proposals for charitable work that I kept tucked away like secret weapons. Every paper was a piece of armor, every contract a blade. I was not just waiting, I was sharpening. One evening, when the house was silent and my husband had gone to bed, I opened the safe again. My reflection in the steel door startled me. I didn't look weak at all. I looked calm, steady, like someone who had already won. I pressed my palm against the cold metal and whispered to the empty room, "Soon." The night before Christmas Eve, trucks began arriving at the mansion across the street. Workers strung wires, hung garlands, installed lights that twisted around every balcony and tree. During the day, the house looked lifeless, a skeleton waiting for breath. But I knew what would happen when the switch was flipped. And on Christmas night, when their laughter filled their golden dining room, the darkness outside would burst into brilliance. The mansion would come alive, every light blazing in triumphant defiance. The house wasn't just decoration, it was revelation. It was the stage I had built for the moment they would finally see me, not as the poor girl they dismissed, but as the woman who had been holding all the power from the very beginning. The first rumor slipped quietly into the neighborhood like a spark carried on the wind. Someone mentioned at the cafe that the mansion across the street had been purchased by an anonymous buyer, someone with more money than sense. Within hours, the whisper had become a flame. By the end of the week, everyone was talking. The timing was not an accident. I had let it leak, a deliberate drop placed in the right ears, knowing exactly how fast gossip spreads when curiosity is fed by envy. The story shifted with every retelling. Some said the buyer was an oil magnate, others a celebrity trying to escape the spotlight. But one phrase stuck: a billionaire in hiding. The effect was immediate. Women in fur coats lingered outside the wrought iron gates, speculating about who would appear. Men at the country club shook their heads and wondered if the neighborhood would lose its exclusivity. My phone buzzed with links to blogs and news snippets, each headline growing bolder. The mystery mansion owner, everyone wants to know. Inside my husband's family home, I watched the tension rise. His mother tried to laugh it off, claiming that true wealth did not flaunt itself with lights and architecture. Yet I saw the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes strayed toward the dark house at night, as though it mocked her from across the street. And then one afternoon, a blogger posted a single cutting line. Some say the owner is none other than the daughter-in-law they discarded, the one they call poor. The words spread faster than the lights had been strung. Suddenly, conversations in hushed corners of the neighborhood carried my name. At the grocery store, strangers glanced at me differently, curiosity glinting in their eyes. I kept my silence, letting the rumor swell unchecked. The truth was powerful, but the suspicion was stronger. It forced them to question everything they thought they knew. His mother's voice grew sharper with each passing day. She called relatives, desperate to prove the rumor false, but the harder she tried, the more people wondered why she fought so hard. I didn't need to say a word. Silence was the loudest weapon. But silence unsettled my husband. One night, just past midnight, I heard the faint knock on the door of my new mansion. He stood there alone, shoulders hunched, his face caught between shame and fear. "Emily," he whispered as I opened the door, "you need to stop this." I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Stop what?" "The rumors," he said. "My mother, our family's reputation, it's unraveling. People are starting to believe." He trailed off, unable to finish. His eyes searched mine, begging me for denial, for mercy. I let him stew in the silence before answering. "What exactly are they starting to believe?" "That you," he swallowed, "that you're the one behind it. That you own this house. That you've been planning something." His words trembled like a confession, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, perhaps, but of what I represented, truth he couldn't control. I smiled gently, the kind of smile that could be mistaken for kindness. Rumors are strange things, aren't they? They grow where you least expect. Perhaps if your family treated me differently, no one would believe them. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Please, Emily, don't let this go any further. Keep whatever you're doing quiet, at least until after Christmas. Let us preserve some dignity." I pretended to hesitate, as though weighing compassion against resentment. Finally, I nodded. "Very well, I won't say a word." Relief flooded his face. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back before he touched me. His lips parted, but no words came. He left soon after, walking back across the street, his shoulders heavy with unspoken dread. When the door shut behind him, I stood in the silence of the grand hallway, the hum of hidden wires in the walls whispering like secrets, waiting to be revealed. Outside, the mansion loomed dark, its brilliance concealed behind a single switch. Yes, I had agreed to his plea. I would stay quiet. But silence was never surrender. It was strategy. And as I looked through the frosted window at the golden glow of their house, I felt the plan solidify inside me. The game was no longer about survival. It was about control. On Christmas night, When the world was watching, their control would shatter. Christmas night arrived cloaked in snow, the air sharp with the smell of pine and smoke from nearby chimneys. Across the street, the grand dining room of my in-laws glowed golden, laughter echoing faintly through the frosty air. They toasted, unaware of the storm waiting just beyond their windows. At precisely 7 o'clock, I gave the signal. In an instant, the mansion around me exploded into light. Strings of bulbs traced every arch and balcony. Trees shimmered with cascades of silver and red, and spotlights bathed the facade in a brilliance that could be seen from blocks away. It wasn't decoration. It was revelation. The house was alive, declaring itself with a roar of electricity. The effect was immediate. Curtains rustled across the street as faces pressed to windows. My mother-in-law's laughter cut short, replaced by a stunned silence. From where I stood on my balcony, I could see her through the glass, frozen mid-toast, her champagne flute slipping from her hand. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound muffled but undeniable. For the first time, her composure cracked, and the woman who had mocked me as unworthy was stripped bare by nothing more than light. Neighbors poured into the street, marveling, whispering, pointing. Phones appeared, photos snapped, videos streamed online. Within minutes, the glow of the mansion wasn't confined to our block. It had spread to social media, hashtags multiplying like sparks. The mystery mansion. Revealed. The poor daughter-in-law? Every eye turned toward me and I let them see. But the spectacle was only the opening act. Inside, guests filed through my doors. Neighbors, acquaintances, even reporters I had quietly invited. Music filled the air, glasses clinked, laughter rose. My home was no longer silent. It was alive, pulsing with the energy of triumph. I welcomed everyone with ease, each handshake and smile a declaration that I belonged, not because I was accepted by them, but because I had claimed my own place. Across the street, my husband's family watched from behind their gilded windows, trapped in their golden cage. Whispers ran through the crowd. How could they treat her that way? Did they know who she was? Their image, once polished to perfection, began to fracture under the weight of public judgment. I hadn't planned to confront them directly, but fate delivered them to me. My husband appeared at my door, his face pale, his voice pleading. "Emily, please, this isn't necessary. Invite them in. Let us explain. We can still fix this." I studied him for a long moment, the music swelling behind me, the lights blazing above. "Fix this?" I repeated softly. "By pretending it never happened? By sweeping your silence under the rug with theirs?" He faltered, shame shadowing his features. Behind him, his mother stood stiff, refusing to cross the threshold, her pride a prison. The crowd noticed, murmurs rising like waves, and that was when I spoke, not to him, not to her, but to everyone watching. "I was told poverty didn't belong at their table," I said, my voice carrying through the night. "Tonight, I say arrogance doesn't belong at mine." A hush fell over the crowd. My husband's face blanched. His mother's lips parted, but no words came. I lifted my glass, the crystal catching the blaze of lights. I built this life myself, and I need nothing from those who despise me. Not their approval, not their fortune, not even their son. The words struck harder than any spectacle. Gasps rippled, phones recorded, the story cementing itself in real time. My husband stared at me, disbelief and desperation warring in his eyes. Then, calmly, deliberately, I set down my glass. "I will be filing for divorce," I announced, my tone steady as steel. "And I will take nothing from your family. Not because I cannot, but because I already have everything I need." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some in shock, others in awe. Cameras flashed, the night immortalized. Across the street, the golden dining room seemed smaller, dimmer, swallowed by the brilliance radiating from my home. My mother-in-law turned away at last, her shoulders stiff, her empire of judgment crumbling. Not with a bang, but with the silence of being irrelevant. I stood on the balcony, lights blazing behind me, the cold air filling my lungs. I had not just survived their cruelty, I had burned it down and risen from the ashes, brighter than their chandeliers could ever hope to shine. Victory has a strange taste, sweet at first, intoxicating even, but bitter when it lingers too long. After Christmas night, my story spread like wildfire. Videos of my speech, the lights, the stunned faces of my in-laws, every clip went viral. For a brief moment, I was no longer the poor girl they scorned. I was the woman who turned humiliation into a spectacle of triumph. But triumph comes with silence. The mansion that had been filled with laughter that night now echoed with emptiness. Guests returned to their own lives, neighbors found new gossip, and the screens that once celebrated me now replayed the same videos on loop, detached from the real woman behind them. I walked through rooms of polished marble and glass, and the sound of my heels was the only reminder that I was not invisible. At first, I dismissed the loneliness as a passing storm. I buried myself in work, attending meetings, reviewing contracts, expanding the empire I had fought to build. But shadows crept into the edges of my triumph. It began with emails, anonymous, venomous. "You don't deserve any of it. We know what you've done." I deleted them, but they multiplied. Soon came the messages on social media, comments dripping with threats and envy. Most were the noise of strangers, but one night, a text appeared on my private phone number. "She's not your real enemy." The words froze me in place. My first thought was paranoia. Had my mother-in-law orchestrated this, grasping at one last attempt to claw me down? But no, the phrasing was too intimate, too knowing. Whoever it was, they weren't just guessing. They were watching. For the first time, victory felt fragile, like glass held too tightly. The answer arrived not in whispers, but in actions. My company, once stable, began to falter. Confidential documents leaked online, projections twisted into rumors, headlines claiming instability. Investors grew cautious, their confidence shaken by information no outsider should have had. The stock, poised to soar with our public launch, staggered instead. And then I saw her. At a charity gala weeks after Christmas, my sister-in-law approached with her usual warmth. "Emily," she said, her voice velvet, her embrace light, "I've missed you." Her smile was flawless, practiced, but her eyes lingered too long on the diamond clasp of my necklace, on the subtle tension in my shoulders. It clicked in that moment. She'd always been watching, always listening. She had been the one to feign kindness while her mother spat cruelty. She played the long game better than any of them, hiding her ambition beneath layers of civility. And now she was striking. Her reach was deeper than I expected. People within my own team, people I trusted, had been compromised. Files had been stolen, meetings recorded. She had infiltrated not through brute force, but through charm and manipulation, weaving her way into the cracks of my empire. One evening, after hours of combing through reports of irregularities, I opened my laptop to find a single document saved on the desktop. It wasn't from me, nor from anyone I recognized. A single sentence glared back. "Your house is not the only thing lit up, Emily. Your walls are made of glass." I slammed the lid shut, heart racing. Someone close, too close, was feeding her. The betrayal burned worse than my mother-in-law's disdain. This was not the open cruelty of being told I didn't belong. This was venom hidden in honey, a knife slid between ribs by someone who once offered an embrace. I sat in the dim light of my study, staring at the document spread before me, realizing the war had only changed forms. The enemy was no longer outside, mocking me across a dinner table. She was inside the very heart of what I had built, pulling strings I hadn't seen. My victory on Christmas had been public, loud, undeniable. But this battle would be silent, fought in boardrooms and behind closed doors, a war of whispers and sabotage. And as I traced the lines of betrayal back to their source, I felt the shift within me. My fight was no longer about dignity or revenge. It was survival. In the days that followed the betrayal, I felt hollow. The mansion that had once glowed like a beacon seemed oppressive, its polished walls reflecting only my isolation. I spent nights pacing through empty rooms, haunted not by my mother-in-law's cruelty, but by the shadow of my sister-in-law's treachery. The war I had fought for dignity had transformed into something darker, an endless cycle of power, suspicion, and retaliation. One sleepless dawn, I stood before the mirror. The woman staring back no longer looked like me. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth set in a line of battle, but there was no warmth, no softness. "Is this what you wanted?" I whispered to my reflection. The silence answered for me. I realized then that my vengeance, as justified as it had been, had chained me just as tightly as their scorn once did. I had become a prisoner of the game I thought I had mastered. For the first time, I asked myself a different question. Not how to win, but how to be free. The choice was excruciating. Revenge had fueled me, built me, protected me, but it was also devouring me. If I held onto it, I would spend the rest of my life fighting shadows, mistaking survival for living. So I made the decision that terrified me most. I let go. I forgave, not them, but myself. I forgave the girl who once believed she wasn't enough, the woman who endured humiliation in silence, the fighter who clung to anger as armor. I told her she could rest now, that she deserved more than a battlefield, and in that forgiveness, something inside me shifted. The chains loosened, the weight lifted. For the first time in years, I felt light. Letting go didn't mean retreat. It meant transformation. I redirected my energy into something beyond myself. I founded a foundation for women who, like me, had been dismissed, excluded, or betrayed by the very families meant to protect them. The fund offered not just financial aid, but education, mentorship, and a community where scars became strength. The impact spread quickly. Stories poured in from women across the country. A young mother locked out of her in-laws' home, a widow stripped of inheritance, a student told she wasn't worthy of her fiancé's family. Each voice echoed mine, and together they created a chorus too loud to be ignored. Invitations soon followed, conferences, interviews, book deals. I stood on stages where once I had been silenced, telling my story not as a tale of revenge, but as proof that pain can be transmuted into power. My words lit up auditoriums, and I watched faces change, women straightening their spines, men shifting uncomfortably in their seats, children listening with wide eyes. I had become more than a scandal, more than a rumor. I had become a symbol. But the greatest transformation was within myself. One evening, after a keynote speech that ended in a standing ovation, I returned home and paused before the mirror. For a long time, I hesitated, afraid of who I might see. But when I finally lifted my gaze, the woman staring back was not the shattered bride, not the calculating avenger. She was whole. Her eyes held both steel and softness, her smile quiet but unshakable. I touched the glass lightly, whispering to her, "You are not what they called you. You are what you chose to become." The mansion lights glowed outside, softer now, no longer weapons but reminders of how far I had come. And in that reflection, I didn't see the betrayed wife or the outcast daughter-in-law. I saw a legacy, a woman who had turned ashes into fire, fire into light, and light into something eternal. The past no longer held me. The game was over. I had broken it. And in its place, I had built something that would last far beyond me.